This is Unit 5, Level 3, the hierarchy of shapes. So we've been talking a lot about shapes and going by their definition. Let's go ahead and put this into a classification system, much like we did with our animals when we did vertebrates and invertebrates and our plants. We're going to go ahead and kind of come up with some type of system that we can use to classify them. So we're first going to start with that word polygon. Polygon, remember, is any closed shape that is made of straight lines. And it's a 2D shape, meaning it's not three-dimensional. It doesn't stand out from the paper. It's a two-dimensional shape. It's got to be a closed figure. It's got to be made of straight lines. And we're going to name these based on the number of sides and the number of angles. So we're going to start with polygons. Every shape we're going to classify today is going to be a polygon because it's going to be a closed shape made of those straight lines. And the first one we're going to start with are our three-sided shapes. You guessed it, our triangles. Remember, tri meaning three. Our triangles have three angles, but they also have three sides. And those are the two ways that we can classify them. So we can classify it based on its sides, or we can classify it based on its angles. For sides, remember, when it had three sides equal, we called that equilateral. Two sides was isosceles, and no sides equal was called scalene. On the angles, we had acute, right, and obtuse. That's our first one, three-sided shape. When we get to our four-sided shapes, that's when we have our quadrilaterals. Now, we break those quadrilaterals up based first on their parallel sides. We said that there was one shape that had at least one set of parallel sides, and we called that trapezoid. So we're going to start out with our trapezoids because they have at least one set of parallel sides. If we had no parallel sides on a quadrilateral, it would be called a kite. A kite has no parallel sides. They do not stay equal distance apart. All right, moving back over to the ones that have parallel sides. Remember, a trapezoid has at least one pair. Well, we know that there are some shapes out there that have two pairs of parallel sides. They also have opposite sides equal. Those shapes, and the name helps you, is parallelogram. Remember, parallelograms have two sets of parallel sides. Parallelogram. You have to bear with my drawings here. Parallelogram, two sets of parallel sides. Well, we know there are some shapes that have two sets of parallel sides and the opposite sides are equal, but they also have four right angles. That shape is called a rectangle. A rectangle, if you'll notice, is a parallelogram. Right? It's coming down. It's kind of like the parent of it. Because a rectangle does have two sets of parallel sides, just like a parallelogram. It also has opposite sides equal, but it has that added piece where it has to have four right angles. So that means every rectangle is going to be a parallelogram, but not every parallelogram is going to be a rectangle. So it works going back up, but it doesn't work to continually to keep coming back down. I'll show you what I mean here in a minute as we work through this. Another shape that has two sets of parallel sides, opposite sides are equal, but in fact has four equal sides, is what we call a rhombus. Remember, a rhombus has four equal sides. Now, that means that every rhombus is a parallelogram because every rhombus has two sets of parallel sides. But not every parallelogram is going to be a rhombus because they may be rectangles. Also, to tell you, notice that there's no connection between rectangle and rhombus. A rhombus isn't a rectangle, and a rectangle can't be a rhombus. But if we take traits from each of them, we can come up with, or attributes, we can come up with another shape that has both the 4 right angles of a rectangle and also has the 4 equal sides of a rhombus. And that shape, you guessed it, is a square. A square, which is our bottommost shape, a square is always a rhombus and it's also always a rectangle. It's always a parallelogram. It's always a trapezoid, and it's always a quadrilateral, and it's always a polygon. It has lots of names. But when we get right down to it, we call it a square because it has 4 equal sides, 4 right angles, opposite sides are equal, and it has parallel sides. We call it a square. This is our group of quadrilaterals. Again, as you go down, not every trapezoid, some trapezoids are going to stop right here. Not every trapezoid is going to become a parallelogram. Not every parallelogram is going to become a rectangle. Not every parallelogram is going to become a rhombus. But every square is a rectangle. Every rectangle is a parallelogram. Every parallelogram is a trapezoid, just based on definition alone. Now, there were some other shapes that we covered. I know we covered our 3-sided shape and our 4-sided shape here. But what happens if we get to a 5-sided shape? That shape is called a pentagon. Pentagon. Next, if we have a 6-sided shape, it's called a hexagon. Hexagon. A 7-sided shape would be a heptagon, but we're going to go ahead and move all the way out to our next well-known shape, which is an octagon. Octagon has 8 sides, and it's that stop sign. Okay. So again, every octagon is a polygon because it's a closed shape made out of straight lines. But not every polygon is going to be an octagon because it may be a hexagon or it may be a pentagon. So again, it works from going down, back up, the always statements. A square is always a rhombus. A rhombus is always a parallelogram. A parallelogram is always a trapezoid, but it doesn't work going down. Not every polygon is going to be a quadrilateral because it may be a triangle, or it may be a pentagon or a hexagon or an octagon. And there are several other names. We're just going to focus on these for now, but there are several other names because you can have lots of sided shapes. Again, this is Unit 5, Level 3, Hierarchy of Shapes. And this is a picture of our hierarchy.